As with the mathematical operations that we looked at in the previous movie, Access provides us with a few ways that we can modify and combine text-based data types. For instance, we can extract a person's initials from a table of first and last names. We can do this using what Access calls string functions. The key here is to think about your text-based data as a simple string of characters or individual letters, and we'll use their positions to help extract the pieces that we need. Let's go ahead and create a new query in Design View to explore this. I'm going to go ahead and add my customers table here, and we'll close the Show Table window. I'm going to add the first name and the last name just by double-clicking on those fields. Let's go into the third column, and I'll right-click and I'll choose Build to launch the Expression Builder. The first thing that I want to look at here is called text concatenation. Concatenation means to join two text strings together. Let's go into our database information here and find the tables and the customers table there. What I can do is double-click on first name to put in a reference to the first name field, and then type in the concatenation character, which is the ampersand, which is Shift-7 on your keyboard. Let's go ahead and join the first name to the last name by double-clicking on the last name field here. Let's go ahead and say OK. That'll drop it down into this third column here, and we'll press Run. Now I can see I have the first name, the last name, and the combined first and last name for each of our customers. Now Access is being very literal here. It's directly joining the first name to the last name, and perhaps I was expecting to see a space in here. If we need the space in there, we need to actually add that manually. Let's go back into Design View and add in the space. I'll come back into this third column, right-click and say Build, and that'll drop us back into the Expression Builder. In order to add a space between the first name and the last name, we need to come here into the middle and literally join this to a space character. So I'll say first name and then in quotation marks I'll type in a space. And then I'll join that to the last name. I also have this text over here at the very beginning that says expression1 or expr1. Anytime we calculate new values, Access automatically wants to add a column alias to the front of that so that it knows what to call that column. Oftentimes, this is going to be meaningless to us. So let's go ahead and give it a name that makes sense. I'm going to call this full name. Make sure you leave the colon in there so that Access knows that everything before the colon is the alias and everything after the colon is where the data is coming from. Let's go ahead and say OK, and that'll update our function down here. We'll go ahead and say Run, and that looks a little bit better. Let's go ahead and take a look at some other functions. I can go ahead and go into Design View, and in the fourth column, I'll right-click and say Build once again. Now let's go ahead and explore some functions here in this Functions category and in the Built-in Functions group. I'm going to go into a group called Text, so I'll scroll down here to the bottom and choose Text. Here are a whole bunch of different functions that manipulate text-based data in your database. If you click on a function, you'll get a description down here on the bottom about what that function does. For instance, this one returns an integer representing the character code corresponding to the first letter in a text string. I can go through each of these functions to click on them and see what they do. To get additional help on the function, you can click on this blue hyperlink right above. That'll launch your web browser and jump you to Microsoft's help document on each function. Now it looks like Microsoft has updated their pages a little bit, so we might have to click an additional link to get into the syntax. Let's go ahead and close out our browser and go back into Access. Now there's a couple of text functions that I want to explore here. Let's go ahead and scroll down through the list and find one called left. There it is right there. The left function, if I read the text on the bottom, it says it returns a string containing a specified number of characters from the left side of a text string. So let's go ahead and use that one to extract characters from our first name. I'm going to double click on it to add that up into the Expression Builder at the top. Now anywhere you see a text here that has these angle quotes before and after it, for instance the word string or the word length, these are placeholders for the various arguments that we need to supply. The left function has two arguments, one called string and one called length. We need to tell the left function which string we want to start with using the string argument here, and then we need to tell it how many characters we want to extract from the left using the length argument here. So let's go ahead and provide the string that we're going to start with. I'll click on string and that highlights. Then we'll go into our database file down here, go into tables, go into customers, and double click on first name. So we're going to start with our customer's first name. Then how many characters are we going to extract? I'll click on length and I'll just type in a 1. That should extract the first character from our customer's first name. Let's go ahead and say OK and run it to see the results. Now we can see the customer's first name in this column here, and we can see their corresponding first initial in this column right over here. Let's go back into Design View and modify this a little bit further. I'm going to go back into this fourth column, right-click and build, and now we can concatenate the results of this left function using the ampersand character, just like we did a moment ago. This time in quotation marks, I'm going to put a period and a space, and then the closing quote. And then I'll concatenate that with the last name, once again by going into the database, tables, customers, and then double-clicking on last name. I'm going to give it an alias here that says first initial and last name. Let's go ahead and say OK, and we'll run it to see the results. And now we can see we've successfully changed our first name and last name fields into two different ways of presenting our customers' names. Let's go back into Design View and take a look at a couple more string functions. I'll right-click here and go back into Build. I'm going to go into my functions, into my built-in functions. In the second window, I'm going to scroll to the bottom and choose Text, and take a look at the third column to see a few more. Some other useful functions that I've found is this mid one here. The mid function returns a string containing a specified number of characters from within another string. We can see if we double-click on it that the mid function starts with a string, it has a starting position, and a length. The mid function is useful for removing characters from the middle of a text string. Let's go ahead and highlight this and remove it. If I scroll up a little bit, I'll find a function called len. Len will give us the length of a string. So for instance, if I double-click on len and then feed it the first name from our customers, I'll go into my tables, customers, and double-click on first name. Oh, looks like I had the cursor in the wrong spot. So let me highlight this, delete it. There, I'll click on the word string here, and then re-double-click on first name to put it inside of the length function. Let's go ahead and say OK, and then run it. And now I can see how many characters are in our customers' first names. There's one more text function that I want to show you that's really useful if you're importing lots of data. Once again, we'll go into Design View. I'll go into the next column over. I'll right-click and say Build. Again, we'll go into our functions, our built-in functions, and our text functions over here. If I scroll through the list, I'll find one called ltrim. There's also a function called rtrim, and then there's a function called just trim. The trim functions will remove space characters from either the beginning, using the ltrim, the end, using the rtrim, or both the beginning and the end, using the trim function. Oftentimes when you're importing lots of data from, say, an Excel file or another source, you might get extraneous spaces that come along for the ride. So using the trim function can remove those extra spaces from any text-based characters that you might import. Now, by combining some of these functions in our queries, we can come up with some interesting new ways to present our results. When feeding our query results into a report, or simply reviewing the data sheet, the appropriate and creative use of string functions can increase the legibility of our data.